Yeah, that title isn't an exaggeration at all. Unicorn Overlord really is that good, but honestly, given that this game was made by Vanillaware, the same people who made the masterpiece that is 13 Sentinels, that shouldn't be surprising in the slightest. It wouldn't be wrong to say that basically every game they've ever made has been great for one reason or another, with the one element they all share being their gorgeous hand-drawn presentations. Unicorn Overlord, though, is definitely something special. Having started development and production during 2014, Akiyasu Yamamoto and his team set out to make a brand new strategy RPG reminiscent of the 90s era of the genre, both for their love of it and the fact that the market for games like this was dominated by pre-existing IPs. Due to members of the team being in between other projects at the time and the ever-increasing scale of the project though, it would take a full 10 years for the game to come out. But let me tell you, those 10 years were time very well spent, because all of the love and passion Vanillaware put into Unicorn Overlord has helped create what is easily my new favorite strategy RPG, and a game more people really need to play. So join me while I explain why you should consider giving this masterpiece of a strategy RPG the chance it absolutely deserves. Taking place on the continent of Evereth, our story starts in the kingdom of Cornia's capital city, Gran Corine, where the Cornian general Valmor is leading a very successful rebellion against its current queen, Elenia. Knowing Valmor won't just stop at taking her own life, Elenia orders her personal guard Joseph to take her son Prince Elaine and the sacred ring of the unicorn to the remote island of Palavia, in an effort to keep them safe from the general. After his rebellion, Valmor decided to use his new power as Cornia's king to refound the ancient Zenoiran Empire, with him taking the title of Emperor and changing his name to Galerius. He didn't stop there though, because over the next 10 years, Galerius spent his time conquering the whole continent as well. In the present, Elaine, along with his friends Scarlet, Lex, and Chloe, joined Joseph in creating the Liberation Army in an attempt to overthrow Zenoira after they finally attacked the island of Palavia. During the attack, however, after an encounter with Joseph's now evil old friend Hodrick, it's revealed that Zenoira is using some kind of mind control or brainwashing spell to get people to work for them after the Ring of the Unicorn mysteriously zaps him back to normal, with Hodrick having no memory of anything that's happened during Galerius' 10-year rule. Alright, so in regards to the actual plot of Unicorn Overlord, while I did really enjoy it for what it was, aside from some genuinely cool and surprising twists, it's about as vanilla as you'd expect after hearing that plot summary. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that's a bad thing at all. For the kind of game Unicorn Overlord is, it works really well, and while I can't go into it at all because of spoilers, there's certain parts of the story that do help make the world really interesting. I mean, heck, in all honesty, I don't really have any actual problems with it overall, but at the same time, aside from the previously mentioned twists in the world itself, I don't have much in the way of praise either. The actual writing for the characters, though, is a bit of a different story. Unicorn Overlord's main cast can be best described as solid. Really, all of them are good, and at least for me, I can't think of anyone that's not likable or interesting in some way, and this includes all of the optional characters. Now, due to the sheer volume of characters in the game, in that there are over 60 of them, and with me having only seen like, maybe half of all of the rapport conversations in the game, more on those in a moment, I'm just gonna keep the discussion here brief. Of the main cast, my current favorite is probably Elaine. Characters who are especially kind or compassionate are something I've always really enjoyed, but I loved that it doesn't just come from his nobility like you would expect, and it more so comes from the kind of life he's had to live thanks to Galerius. As for the optional characters though, while I can't say exactly who my definitive favorites are overall, I can say for sure that my favorite moment from the recruitment stages come from Melisandre's. Like, I couldn't help but laugh when she just came outright and asked Elaine if she could be his consort when he becomes king, mostly because of just how unexpected it was. I mean really, it takes a lot of bravery and an even greater as well as very concerning amount of thirst to ask a guy you've known for maybe an hour a question like that. For real though, story-wise, all of the recruitment stages are very good, and they do a great job at introducing you to that character as well as showing off their personality. While some of them are fairly self-contained stories, others can give some development and extra backstory for the main cast and world as well. They're definitely just as worth your time in the story department as they are the gameplay one. Now, as for the previously mentioned rapports though, these are pretty much Unicorn Overlord's version of Fire Emblem's support conversations, which for the uninitiated means that these serve as a way to further develop as well as give more fun and interesting moments for other characters. Everyone in the Liberation Army has a dedicated rapport gauge for everyone, with it maxing out at 3 hearts, and it can be increased by fighting with them in combat, eating with them in a tavern, or by giving gifts to them if you're Elaine and said character's been stationed as a guard. Aside from the extra conversations though, a higher rapport gauge will also give small stat bonuses for characters in the same unit, but what bonuses you actually get will vary based on their classes. Something to keep in mind with all of this though is that while everyone can get stat bonuses with everyone, they don't all have rapport conversations with each other, so keep this in mind when pairing people up or buying food, because that last one can get very taxing on your funds if you let it. On the note of pairing people up though, for those of you who might be interested, you can romance characters in the game, and by characters I mean Elaine specifically, with like a vast majority of the roster being options. But you will need to have a maxed out rapport gauge with them in order to actually romance said characters once you've unlocked the ability to do so. While I did end up choosing Elaine's childhood friend Scarlet since she feels like the most canon option to me, my favorite romantic option has to be with the leader of Elheim, Eltalinda. Her interactions with Elaine and their rapport conversations got incredibly sweet after a while. Now, with all of that being said though, I'd be remiss for not talking about the game's hand-drawn presentation. All of the characters and their designs look great, and some of the backgrounds and fights are just breathtaking. I love all of the little details, like with the town backgrounds in Drakenhold. I've always loved games with hand-drawn art styles, and Unicorn Overlord, much like everything else Vanillaware's ever made, is an absolutely gorgeous feast for the eyes. And on that note though, let me tell ya, much like their other games, nothing in Unicorn Overlord looks quite as good as the food does. At this point, Vanillaware is up there with most anime in making food of any kind look insanely delicious. Like, stare at really any dish from the taverns long enough and Unicorn Overlord will make you hungry, just like it did for me when I saw this rice dish and pizza, both of which I now need to find recipes for, because I can't not try and make these for myself. Real quick though, I gotta say, Unicorn Overlord's soundtrack is just as great as its visuals. All of the overworld and battle themes are wonderful to listen to, with Come Faldaemon and Heir to the Dragonlands easily being my favorite songs in the game. Even if you don't buy Unicorn Overlord yourself, you owe it to yourself to give these two a listen. You won't be disappointed. With all that being said though, now's about time I get into the gameplay, and let me tell you, Unicorn Overlord is very different compared to most strategy RPGs nowadays. For starters, instead of being grid-based, with each side taking turns moving their units, everything happens in real time. When a stage begins, the enemy will start moving towards your command post, and from there you can deploy as many units as you have Valor points, which normally can be gained by defeating other enemy units and by capturing enemy garrisons as well as command posts. In the event you need a second to figure out who you want to go where, or if you want to use items as well as Valor skills, more on those later, you can pause time at pretty much any point outside of combat. And on that note, let's get into how battle works in Unicorn Overlord, because this is easily one of the most innovative combat systems I've seen from a strategy RPG. First off, instead of having singular characters go out to fight, everyone is put into units, which can have a max capacity of 5 characters. Said units are all 2x3 grids, and this is where a pretty large majority of Unicorn Overlord strategy comes from. What classes of characters you have in a unit and how they're placed in it can make all the difference in combat. But to better explain why, let's go over skills real quick. Every playable character, as well as enemy, have 2 types of skills they'll use in combat, with those being active and passive, with both costing a certain amount of AP and PP respectively, of which both max out at 4. Now, what skills a character has will be determined by their class, with them learning new ones as they level up, as well as from certain pieces of equipment that can give you skills so long as it's equipped to that character. The most interesting aspect with the skills though, and really combat as a whole, is with Unicorn Overlord's tactics system. If you've played Final Fantasy XII before, you'll already be somewhat familiar with this, since it's fairly reminiscent of that game's Gambit system. To the uninitiated, it's a way of allowing you to set the priority for what a character will use and when, and under what circumstances they should use it, as well as even when they should use it. This leads us back into how unit builds and formations can make all of the difference. In Unicorn Overlord, combat happens automatically, with the outcome of the fight being predetermined based on how both you and the enemy's unit is built, with the outcome being shown to you before the fight even begins with both sides' collective health bar. If the outcome's not exactly looking the way you want it to, simply going into the Organize menu before a fight to shift around the formation for your units as well as your equipment and tactics could make all of the difference. Now, having said that, there are other ways to turn things in your favor before the fight even begins though, with assists and Valor skills. Starting with assists, both ranged as well as magic characters will be able to use one if they're set as the leader for their unit. These can either heal you or deal damage to the enemy unit at the start of battle, but as a trade-off, unless the assisting unit's in a garrison or watchtower, they'll have to use a bit of stamina, which I'm just now realizing I haven't explained yet. Alright, so real quick, each unit has a certain amount of stamina based on who the party leader is, and aside from the assists, you'll use 1 stamina every time you fight an enemy, and if it hits 0, said unit will become immobile and unable to fight back if they're attacked at all. Stamina can be restored by either resting for a short period of time, which can be reduced, or eliminated outright with hourglass items, by capturing an enemy garrison, or by consuming certain items. This mechanic pretty much exists as a way to keep you from bum rushing the enemy with just 1 or 2 units, and thankfully it never becomes a problem at all, so long as you're not being careless. Getting back to the original point though, Valor skills are class-specific special attacks or supporting moves that can be used outside of battle to either reduce an enemy's health before the fight begins, or to support your units through buffs or by debuffing the enemies, with all of them of course costing Valor points. Some of my personal favorites are really any skill that lets me damage multiple enemies at once, like the Knight's Wild Rush. Or in the case with the Griffin Knights, their skill that gives units in an area double movement speed for faster travel, which is honestly one of the many reasons you should be using Griffin Knights. They are very good. And actually, on that note, before we get into the other major half of the gameplay, I want to quickly go over a few of the classes in Unicorn Overlord. There's well over 60 in the game, including promotions, so we'll just talk about some of my favorites, starting with the aforementioned Griffin Knights. Aside from their Valor skill, the other benefits to them are their ability to fly when they're unit leader, thus letting them go past obstacles of all kinds, and how they can hit and possibly even mow down an entire row of enemies with 1 attack. Like, do not sleep on Fran at all. She and really most of the flying class characters such as Hilda are super good. Next up, I need to give a shout out to the magic classes, or more specifically with anyone like Yana and the one druid character the story gives you, Selvi. Characters who use magic to attack usually hit pretty hard against most units, especially when paired with other characters who have a high damage output and can protect them like Lex or knight units like Clive. Selvi though is useful for an entirely different reason, in that she's all about debuffing the enemy. Druid characters are all about reducing a unit's attack and damage output, with them getting multiple skills that do just that. Let me tell ya, there's a reason the game only outright gives you 1 character like Selvi, because they're a fantastic addition to really any team. Finally, we have pretty much every bestial unit in the game. Aside from the fact that literally all of them are great in general, they all share one major trait. See, whenever night rolls around, if a bestial is unit leader, their movement speed drastically increases, and all of them, regardless of the leader, will gain stat boosts of some kind. Now, what those are, I'm not actually sure of because I can't find any information for it, but I can assure you it's noticeable. Trust me, you'll feel those boosts for yourself once you get to Basterios, because that kingdom easily gave me the most trouble out of any other region in the game. On that note, actually, I do think the first half of Unicorn Overlord has a bit of an over-leveling problem. I'm not 100% sure why this is, but up until Basterios, a lot of my characters were a few levels higher than the recommended level for most stages in Drakenhold and Elheim. Now, if you're anything like me, this won't bother you much at all, but if you're someone who cares a lot about challenge and doesn't like being over-leveled at all, this'll probably be a bit annoying, and it's something you'll want to keep an eye on. Aside from that though, Unicorn Overlord as a strategy RPG is just really great all around, and with its unique ideas and mechanics, it does kinda make me rethink what games like this can even play like. The only other issue I might have is that they give you a level 20 character at the start with Joseph, but honestly, with how this game plays compared to most other strategy RPGs, it wasn't usually an issue. With all that being said though, obviously there's more to Unicorn Overlord than combat, and this is where we get to the fact that this game is, surprisingly enough, kind of open world. And you know what, let's actually talk about that real quick. Initially, the open world starts out small, with it being limited to just Cornea, but once you get far enough into the story, you'll for the most part be able to freely explore Feverith. Really, the only things that'll stop you are the occasional high-level liberation mission, which are exactly what they sound like, and sometimes plot progression. And surprisingly enough, the game pulls an open-world Zelda and gives you multiple ways to fight the final boss early. All you need to do is either fix one of these bridges or do one of these level 40 liberation missions, and you're good to go whenever you're ready. I also just love how rewarding the game is when you take the time to explore. Unicorn Overlord has plenty of items to find in the environment, like consumables hidden in buildings, or even equipment, which you can get plenty of by doing some side quests, like with each kingdom's 4 stone carvings. Getting to some of the other things you can actually do though, when you're not finding new stages, you'll be exploring the world like I've already mentioned, but you'll also be collecting resources and helping build back up each kingdom. See, whenever you do a main quest, side quest, or a liberation mission, you'll free that area from Zenoiran control, and when that happens, you'll have access to whatever towns, cities, or garrisons were in that area. While you can do some shopping in towns or cities for things like items and equipment, you can also deliver certain resources to fix them back up, and once done so, you'll not only get rewarded for each delivery, but you'll also be able to station a guard at that town or city. These guards are always one of your own units, and the benefit to stationing them is that for each guard, you'll get some of that region's resources and a little extra gold after every battle, and when I say little, I do mean little. Having a bunch of guards stationed will inevitably make your life easier when it comes to building up towns or getting an excess of resources for auxiliary deliveries, so you can get extra rewards like money, items, or honors. On that note, actually, let's talk about progression for things that aren't just leveling up. In Unicorn Overlord, you have two things to keep track of in this regard, the previously mentioned honors and renown. Starting with the simpler of the two, renown is pretty much experience points for the Liberation Army. Once you get enough, it'll go up in rank, and you'll gain new benefits, like the ability to further expand how many characters can be in a unit, and eventually you'll get the ability to promote most characters to a stronger, advanced class. To do either of those things though, you'll need to spend honors, which are gotten from finishing stages, doing side quests, delivering resources, or by fighting enemies in the overworld, and you're gonna need a lot of these. Promoting units can be pretty expensive if you're doing so in bulk, but the single largest purchases will always be getting a unit from a max of 4 characters to 5, with that costing 200 honors. You can also use honors to buy mercenaries who you can customize to use in combat, but honestly, while this definitely has its uses, like if you want more of a specific class such as Druid, I personally only really use this for getting more guards, because the amount of towns in the game is a good bit higher than the amount of unique characters the game gives you. Realistically speaking, given what's come out previously this year, Unicorn Overlord more than likely won't actually win Game of the Year, but I can at least say for certainty it'll definitely have a spot as one of the best releases for 2024. It's a great game that does so much new and different compared to other strategy RPGs, and does all of that very well, making for what's easily the best experience I've ever had with any game in the genre. Really, the only true weakness the game technically has is with the more vanilla plot, but honestly, with how great the rest of the package is, I don't know how much that'll even matter for most people. Just like they usually do, Vanillaware did an incredible job with Unicorn Overlord. But hey, if nothing I've said up to this point's convinced you, the game does have a pretty beefy demo, and by beefy, I mean it gives you a solid 7-hour time limit for how long you can play. You can get through half or even most of the first area of the game in that time frame, and it even lets you carry over whatever progress you made if you end up buying the game afterwards. Thank you all for watching, like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and I hope you all have a nice day.